everybody hear me? Ji, Assalamu alaikum, good morning. Welcome to PIDE. We are having a session on education, which is everybody's favorite subject. I don't know why we provide education, but everybody seems to want to do that. So I think it's a good idea to hear about education. Now, I've got Mahmood here. He's going to moderate the session. He's an education entrepreneur. He's the founder of Knowledge Platform, which is a technology education firm which is operating in Pakistan, China, and Indonesia and Singapore. So I thought it'd be good to have the knowledge entrepreneur moderating the session rather than me. So I've pushed upon him, prevailed upon him to moderate the session. We've got three wonderful panelists from Punjab. They've got three people from the Punjab education. Sorry, kya hai ji ye? PMIU, what is that?
Program Monitoring and Implementation.
But of the education?
The School Education Department.
School Education Department. They have been told by their people that they've done a great job in terms of reforming Punjab's education. That DFID had set up, had done a lot of work in Punjab, but none of it went anywhere, though these kids now have done a great job in terms of reforming the education wing. So let's see what they have to tell us. We will listen to them and engage with them and have, I hope, a wonderful conversation with them. तो मैं इस तरह करता हूँ जी, आप लोग आके अपने आप को इंट्रोड्यूस भी करें और साथ आप शुरू भी कर दें, ठीक है? तो आइए, whoever wants to start. Amna will start. Amna, just introduce yourself. जी, Mehboob, you take over. Sorry.
Thank you, Nadeem, for asking me to moderate at such short notice. It's always fun to take up a challenge in short order. So I think what I'll do is, I know the presentation, we've got a total of about 45 minutes. So instead of going on too long on the presentation, because I think the presentation itself can go for about 25-30 minutes, but we keep it to 18. Okay, so I'll let you know after 6 minutes and then 6 minutes, and then we're just going to kill it at 18 minutes. Okay, so let's get going.
So
thank you.
12:16 right now. So
right.
12:34 will be the final
cut off. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Mehboob sir. I'm Amna Ansari and I work as an education specialist at PMIU. What is PMIU? We'll just come to that in a bit. We're associated with the School Education Department, and I've spent over 3 years there now. Looking after, just providing technical and strategic oversight on some of the reform initiatives that Punjab is undertaking. So the way we've organized today's session is that we'll give you a bit of a background on what the School Education Department in Punjab is currently doing, how is it different from what was happening in the previous decade, and then I'll request my team to unpack each of the reform initiatives in detail in the second half of the presentation. Sorry, and we'll conclude with what is the direction that the department is now taking, and what is the locus of improvement of quality of education now and for the coming at least 3 to 4 years. So because we're short on time, I'll try and make this very brief. But this is just a quick overview of who we are and what different departments or entities within the education department are doing and where are we situated. These are attached departments of the education department. Quaid-e-Azam Academy is responsible for imparting training to all the actors in the education chain, so right from head teachers, and our field officers to even school council members, community members. PCTB, of course, is responsible for curriculum content, manuscripts and textbooks. PEF, Punjab Education Foundation, is helping us improve access and enrollment through public-private partnership initiatives. And then PEC Examination Commission is, of course, at least to date, was responsible for the board exams that we have for grade 5 and grade 8 students. We're doing away with grade 5, and we'll come to that later. And then we have PMIU. So PMIU is it's a monitoring and implementation unit, as the name suggests. We're responsible for implementation of ongoing donor-funded programs. We've got a few running with the World Bank and DFID right now. So the most popular is the Third Punjab Education Sector Project, which is a $300 million project. And then we have school construction and rehabilitation with DFID, and some upcoming projects like human capital investment and others that we're expanding on, like Insaf Afternoon School program. But I think the thing that we're most popular for is, you know, our monitoring routines, and I'll just delve deeper into those in a bit. We do regular monitoring of schools, and every year, so you know, we have a school census, and then there's also monthly monitoring, and then finally we also provide dedicated support to SED for different initiatives. So the research unit at PMIU is kind of an acting research unit for the SED as well, and whatever needs to be done kind of flows to PMIU, and we take care of it. So in terms of monitoring, we've got two routines. Every year around October, we begin our school census. Last year, this was actually done digitally for the first time, which was an achievement. And we publish a report around January or February every year on the previous year's data. And then we also have monthly school monitoring, which covers around 95% of the schools every month on a defined set of indicators. Now, on the bottom, of course, you have a quick snapshot of what education or how widespread the education sector is in Punjab. We've got about 52,000 schools, so you can imagine the scale of whatever intervention we take. The number of enrolled children is about 12 million, compares to about 10 million in private schools. And then we've got a large teaching force, so we have about 400,000 teachers, which is, if I'm not wrong, the second largest workforce after the army nationwide. So it's a huge human resource that we've got to cater to. So when you look at this, the scale of education, you're just you're stunned. You don't know where to start your efforts. And I think in the previous decade, the previous regime found a good start in fixing school inputs and focusing on improving accountability for one, which resulted in in some good things. You can see we've got some missing facilities provided in schools. We've got additional children enrolled. We've got additional teachers in the system. But if you take a minute to ponder over, each one of these, you'll see that the challenges are far greater than what seems, and the reality or our perception of reality is very detached from what the numbers are telling us. For example, if I tell you that some thousand schools were able to provide a boundary wall, what does that mean? Is the boundary wall there in full? Is it missing in part? Is it 3 feet tall? Is it 7 feet tall? And more importantly, are children really safe by having that boundary wall built around the school?
If you 6 minutes are up.
Okay.
Every time you spend will cut into your colleagues' time, but keep in mind you can go over your slides.
I'm just finishing. I've just got a couple more. And likewise for teachers, we've inducted a whole lot of teachers in the system, but are they oriented to teach well, and what is the impact on learning? Very quickly, this is a case for change that we're making. There's an imbalance between accountability and school support, and there's a sidelining of student learning. So when you look at children's proficiency in simple reading, writing skills and simple arithmetic problems, they're very, very poor. Only 4% of children 7 to 14 years in Punjab can actually demonstrate adequate numeracy skills. 4%. And inequalities, let's not even get there. We all know what the challenges are: wealth, gender, disability, and so on. So this led us to our vision under the New Deal, which is the current regime's strategic document. We want every child in Punjab to learn meaningfully through committed teaching in accessible and equitable classrooms. Very quickly, our ambition is to not just ensure quality for students, but also teachers. So that you'll see when Abdal unpacks our reforms, there's a huge emphasis on teachers' development, then equitable opportunities and efficiency and transparency, but with the human face. So again, Abdal will probably delve deeper into this, but we're trying to make life easy for teachers and head teachers and all the actors in the chain. I'll skip the priority areas because I think, Abdal, you'll just come to those. And lastly, we've got an education sector plan coming up. The difference between this plan and last times is that we've got a converging effort of the literacy, non-formal, special education and school education departments. The key interventions are innovatively designed around the combined aspirations of all. You have a strategy to address the issue of out-of-school children. You want an integrated management system, and so on. So I'll just ask you to unpack the key education reforms.
Assalamu alaikum ji. My name is Abdal Mufti. I'm the head of research and policy wing at PMIU, which essentially means I do a lot of firefighting, a lot of human resource management, and as little time as I can get for research. So just to set that context, Amna has already set the context of how the reforms have been sort of developed and the current reforms that have been that are currently being implementing. I think it's important to understand firstly is that not everything that is happening in Punjab is new. So it's not like a radical overhaul of the system. It's identifying areas where improvements could have been made and then designing interventions to bring reform in those areas, specifically to those areas. So it's not that the system is restarting, because a lot of work had been done by the previous regime, but the focus was different. Now the focus is more towards quality. So we'll move forward, and the key three major thematic areas that in which the reforms are being developed are driven from the New Deal document that was developed by the government when it came into when the Punjab government was formed. So the first is the priority area, that is learning. We're not going to unpack all of those. We're only going to touch upon the most significant ones here. The others obviously are very important, but we're not going to focus on some of the key ones. So just an overview, so we're working on ECE, which is early childhood education. The medium of instruction in Punjab is being changed to Urdu, at least for the primary education. So that is a very key reform that from starting next year will be implemented. The continuous professional development program for teachers has been reformed. There's a new comprehensive assessment policy framework. It was recently approved by the cabinet, and we're going to touch upon that, and then there's classroom observation and literacy and numeracy. Just to unpack some of them, so I know time is a constraint, so I'm not going to dwell much into detail. We can get those in the discussions. Just briefly, so the first ECE policy in Punjab was drafted in 2017 with the focus that all children between ages of 3 and 5 have an opportunity to develop the cognitive, linguistic and socio-emotional skills, and then ensure school readiness. So that is a key problem. If you look at data in Punjab, one of the biggest dips in enrollment comes from Kachi to 1. So when children transition from pre-primary to primary, that is where the first big dip in enrollment. So that's the first big dropout that happens. So ECE is a way of ensuring that children actually transition, and there's also the school ready. So by the time the child goes into 1, he or she is in a position to take up the academic progress from there. So 11,000 ECE rooms have been established, and by established I mean not constructed. Just the room is already there. It's equipped to make sure that the ECE can be taught in that room. So 28,000 teachers have been trained in the past 3 years. A 2-year ECE curriculum has been developed. Punjab is the first province actually in Pakistan that has developed a 2-year ECE curriculum. It has not been implemented yet, but the plan is that going forward ECE will span from 1 year, which currently it's being implemented in 1 year, to a 2-year curriculum. And then there's dedicated monitoring through MES and
we are into 12 minutes now. So
sure.
Will you take another 2 minutes?
Then we have 18 minutes.
18 altogether. Then we can continue. Okay.
All right. So this is another. I think this is a very major shift. This is more of a shift in philosophy in terms of teacher training. So historically in Punjab, past 15 years at least, the model that was used to train teachers was a cascade model. So it was a very much a top to bottom approach, where they would train master trainers, would train lead trainers would develop a cohort of trainers, and then all the way down to the 400,000 teachers that Amna mentioned. And I think you can easily sort of comprehend that there would be a significant loss of value, a loss of learning on each tier, because the scale is the biggest problem in Punjab is the scale, and because when you cascade training on such a mass level, there will be obviously a drop in value. So now the focus is more on developing a model that is school based. So considering school as a unit for improvement, and this is something a theme that you would see in other reforms as well. Even the CPD model is sort of developed all the way down to a school level, in which a school in itself, and the teacher is trained within that same setting. So a school acts as a unit. There's a head teacher, there's a teacher, and then the AEOs, the assistant education officers, which are championing this new CPD model. So these assistant education officers have been trained as mentors. So the philosophy has shifted from training to mentoring and support, and that also at a school level. And then this is sort of supplemented by a classroom observation regime or a routine that has been developed in Punjab. So this is, the idea is that all these AEOs have been trained on a classroom observation tool. The AEOs then go into the schools. Each month, each AEO has to observe at least 2 teachers in one particular school. And after the observation, the AEO gives feedback to the teacher. And then once a month, all the teachers gather into what we call a teacher forum, where peer-to-peer learning happens, and also AEO sort of informs the teacher through a discussion on where the areas of improvement are. So the idea is to give teachers more personalized support. Instead of in a cascade model, what you can do is that you can define certain areas of improvement right at the top, and then all the way down those have to be cascaded. But at times one teacher might be needing improvement in another area, and another teacher would be needing improvement in another area, because the context is different, and also because the human resource is so much. This actually helps cater to that problem, because it's a lot more personalized. Plus you know exactly where the teachers are lacking through your classroom observations, and then you're improving them on the same areas, and then you're going back each month to observe the teacher again whether or not they've improved on those areas or not. So it's a repetitive cycle that ensures improvement and also ensures support to a teacher. The data, this was one of the key sort of shifts in Punjab now, is that originally data used to come all the way from the field right to the top, and in between it would skip all the tiers that are present in a school education department. So the district, the head teacher, the departments, none of them would have access to data. It would go all the way from the field right to the top, and it would be used to rank districts based on their performances. Now the idea is that because the AEO and the CEO, which is the chief education officer, the one who oversees the district, they need to also know what's happening in their district. The AEO needs to know what's happening in their markers. So all of them have access to the data that is coming from the field, so that they can use that data to give more support and also to make decisions. And obviously all of this data is then consolidated at the provincial level for policy making. So the idea is that the data is not just used to ensure accountability, it's also used to give support and also make decisions at all different tiers. We can show the dashboard. We have the live dashboard as well, but obviously time is a constraint, so we would not go into that. This Punjab assessments have been reformed. So this is one, you can say, like a major change that has happened, and very recently, I think last month, the assessment policy framework has been approved. So originally Punjab, there were one major kind of assessments that were happening, which was conducted by the Punjab Examination Commission, grade 5 and grade 8. They used to, each year Punjab Examination Commission would conduct at a universal level, every child in Punjab who's enrolled in public schools, they would have to appear for a grade 5 and grade 8 exam. The problem, as you can tell, is that the scale, 12 million children enrolled in the system overall, so you can imagine there's a lot of children who would appear for those exams, plus they became high stakes. So whenever an assessment becomes high stakes, there's always chance that there will be more gaming of the system. So and also it does not serve the purpose, because teachers more often than not teach to the test. So if the test becomes high stakes, that means that the teacher would just make sure that the child scores well on a test and would not worry much about learning. So now the assessment system has been reformed into 3 major assessments that would be conducted. We're not calling them examination anymore, we're calling them assessments. First is a summative, which will now be a school-based assessment. So Punjab Examination Commission will design an assessment and it will send these assessments to a school, and the school will conduct it on their own. And they are open to do whatever they have to do with the data. So the data would be available to the school, and the school can then give reports to the children and their parents. The other is the formative assessment, which obviously is conducted by the teacher in the classroom and to drive learning, basically.
That'll be 18 minutes. We'll give you 2 more minutes.
Just 2 more. And the large is the large scale assessment, which will be conducted once every year, and it is it is more of a snapshot of the system to understand every representative sample based test and just to understand the health of the system overall. So it won't be universal. Summative would be universal, formative would be obviously be happening in each and every classroom, and then large scale would be representative. Very briefly, in access, because the previous government has worked a lot on access, the issue of access and mostly out of school children is not as severe in Punjab as you would find it in other provinces. So largely one of the key interventions that have been introduced by the recent government is the Insaf Afternoon School Program. The program basically does is that it converts primary schools into middle schools in the evening to ensure that children who do not have access to a middle school in their vicinity now have a middle school to attend to. So far we've had 20,000 plus enrollment. It's supported by DFID so far, but the government is taking it up and expanding it to a wider audience. Governance. If you follow education reforms overall in Pakistan, you must have heard of this. There's a lot written about it, which is the e-transfer program that has been developed in Punjab. The new government, when they came in, one of the biggest problems is because the teachers and the human resources so much, there's a lot of transfer requests that would come in every day almost, which would then mean that your policy maker, your secretary and your minister would mostly be just tackling that, and there's a lot of political pressure. What they've done is that they've digitized the entire system. So now all the transfers happen through an online system in which the request is put up and it is to be approved at a district level, and then if not, the case is not solved at a district level, comes to a provincial level. What it has done is that it has streamlined the process and also created transparency. So now there's less political involvement and more merit-based transfers happening in Punjab. This is some of the statistics that we have so far. 32,000 requests were put up in phase 1, 16,000 have already been resolved. The green bar is actually the number of transfers that have happened in the 3 phases. Right now Punjab is doing teacher rationalization, after which there will be another cycle. There's a human resource management information system that is being developed. Every teacher now has a profile online in Punjab, and that will be linked going forward with the e-transfers and also with the CPD model, the capacity building. So if you would be able to go and see which teacher has attended which training, how they've performed, how they perform in classroom observations once the data is consolidated.
Thank you. Any last word?
I think the last word mostly is just to sum it up. Reforms obviously is something that maybe I think no one has perfected so far, especially in a system like Punjab with its scale. You can design a very good reform, but once it goes out in the field, you don't know how the actors will sort of react to it. You will see a lot of new ideas here. How many of them you would see being taken up? How many of them you would see not being taken up? That obviously time will tell. But at least this is what we've learned. We've seen the previous government, this government. The focus right now is on quality. So previous government would focus mostly on access and infrastructure. This government actually thinks about quality in a classroom and what happens in a classroom, which I think is the right way of thinking, at least if you want to aspire to the bare minimum. Where does it get us? I think only time will tell us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was a very good and succinct presentation. Since we are at PIDE, I expect that most of the questions will be around the ecosystem, policies, incentive structures, the economics of the education system, but obviously we can entertain other questions as well. But let's try to keep it within the kind of PIDE overall objectives. I had one kick-off question. I looked at the Pakistan education statistics, And I think the last one I looked at was the year ending 2017. So the last 3 years before that, on average, government schools had grown at 2% a year, whereas private sector had grown at about 12%. And if you extrapolate those rates out, already private sector is about 40% of the education system in Pakistan overall. In about 3 or 4 years, certainly in 5 years, the private sector will be bigger than the government sector and keep growing. So my question is, who's your customer? Is it the private sector or the government sector? Are you focusing on these reform objectives correctly? Are you serving both sectors or one sector?
Thank you, Mufti. That's a very relevant question for us as well. I think over time what we've realized is that we can't compete with the private sector, at least for now. They are a reality, and I think we need to understand that. What perhaps needs to be done is that we work hand in hand with them. So I think from regulation, our focus is shifted towards just engagement with the private sector, and I think a major achievement there is the public-private partnership initiatives that we already have. They've enrolled over 2.6 million children. So when you look at the total, the public schools already have 12.6 million, and 2.6 are enrollment through them. So we understand the importance of the private sector and working hand in hand with them. That said, I think the greatest challenge that we're trying to address right now is children who are neither in public schools or private schools. So for us, the key focus now is out-of-school children, and that's, to answer your question, I think they are our client in market right now. What we want to ensure is that they come to school and ideally a public school. And for that, I think there are a lot of there are a lot of strategies that we're building on and implementing. Other than that, it's easy to say that the number of private schools, perhaps in absolute terms, is greater than public schools, or that enrollment is approximately 40% of total enrollment in Punjab. But I think we need to look at system inefficiencies as well. So I think one reason why the rate of increase in public schools is low is that we're trying to consolidate schools as well. The two schools in the same vicinity with very low enrollment, we'd rather just have one or two. We're doing away with, and I think the previous government did away with a lot of those schools as well, which is why the number seems to be kind of capped. But what we're trying to do is that ensure that children, if they enter public schools, they enter at the right age. I think EC is important in that aspect. You don't have overage children, which reduces system inefficiencies, and then once they're there, that they're learning, and that's the second focus, like Abdal said, that we have quality. So to begin with, out-of-school children, and then to make sure the children who are in school, they're learning. Of course, over time, if you tell us, to absorb the entire capacity of private schools right now, I think these will just collapse. We understand that. It's just that there has to be a strategy to work on this.
Actually, I do mean to be difficult. Let's look at, for example, Pakistan International Airlines or whatever. The question is very, very relevant question whether we should try to reform government institutions or try to sell them. Now, education is different in the sense that there is already a thriving private sector. But when I looked at the reforms, and all of the reforms make a lot of sense if your objective is to reform the government school system. But if those are the most of the reforms, then I'd say, there's no real reform on accelerating privatization, helping private sector schools grow, helping the private sector take over the out-of-school children problem. In other words, are we really, is the thrust of your reform improving a diminishing body of schools in terms of the education outputs and number of kids educated, or are you trying to enable the whole system to perform better?
I think a very honest reply to that is the latter. So I think what the challenges that we're dealing with today, they are far too profound for us to, develop, say, a private sector engagement strategy and work actively on that. What we couldn't, I think, unpack in the presentation due to the time constraint was how we've been affected by the previous system. I think the imbalance between accountability and support led to a system that was thriving on fear. And we have to overcome that. It's a psychological thing, it's a behavioral thing. It will take years, if not decades, to overcome. In the minds of teachers, head teachers, every actor in your education service delivery. So I think what we're trying to do right now is to ensure that for that pool of children, the 12.6 that are in school right now, we give the actors the relief and the assurance that you should be delivering what you're responsible for without any penalization or without reprimanding them, and that they're able to teach and bring up some quality numbers, which, like I said, have been sidelined in the past decade.
Any questions? Yes, please. Let's start. Do you have a mic? If you can just introduce yourself.
This is Engineer Mansoor Malik. I had the opportunity of heading the think tank of a political party on education policy, which is now being implemented. So my data would be 2011-12. At that time, whatever debt we had, Pakistani debt in $60 or $50 billion, 10% of that debt was due to education reforms, education policies. Ours was the 11th education policy that we were building up from 2010 to 2015. So my question is, and the business model appears to be the same, $200 million from the Fed or $100 million. The question is, we are adding on the debt in the education sector. Perhaps it could be a research project for PIDE, right from about 47 to 2020. Look at education as a vertical and see how much money has gone into it and not the result not come out of it. So we would like to look at this very objectively, whether we bring in our own resources, how self-reliant are we having local solutions? I mean, Mahathir Mohamad openly mentioned the other day in a conference that we need to have local solutions for the local problems. Otherwise, we're dumping in money and we're adding on to our debt. So that's my question.
That's a great question. Patty can respond, or if anyone wants to add to that or within from the audience, we can do that as well.
So that's a very good question, and I think that's something that we hear or experience day in and day out. In terms of impact of reform, so there's a lot of money that's been pumped into the education sector. What has come out? I think you're right. We need it would be very good if we can have from an academic or a research institute a thorough review of those reforms. More often than not, within the government circles, you don't have much time to do hardcore research. So I think that way it would make an excellent research project, and that's something, by the way, that the research unit at PMIU is also beginning to do, because I think we've got that change of leadership that supports it as well. In terms of kind of value for money, and then also making sure that there's impact in terms of ongoing projects, and for example, Best 3. We're trying to extract as much benefit as we can. So for things that were already here when this regime came in, that was one strategy. The other is, for any new projects, we push back a lot. So rest assured, I can tell you, it's countless, conflicts with the Planning and Development Department, because there's also, in part of pressure from the federal government. It's a resource-starved economy. You need money overall. So there is a push for projects. But the school education department has been pushing back on at least, I can say, 2 to 3 major projects relating to education in Punjab, because we felt that we didn't need money in those areas where the donors were willing to give it. So rest assured, I can tell you, now strategies to borrow money wherever we feel that is important. And finally, the third is to go for grants. So the Punjab Education Sector Plan actually has over $100 million in grant. And the reason we put in so much effort in building that is that Punjab will get around 50.6 million. So we're going for those kinds of inflows.
Great. So we have a great problem to solve, which is the debt.
I'd just like to add with one report. So I won't mention it. As Amna mentioned that the focus now is actually to understand. I think at least if we talk about PMIU's context, so PMIU has been there since 2003. So at least if we track back all this time, PMIU has been here, at least try to understand what all these reforms are. But one thing that we find a major challenge in understanding the impact is how do we measure this impact? So what would be the key indicators that against which we would measure? Would it be learning? Would it be access? Would it be governance? Because the problem is that all of these, if you look at these programs, each program in itself, if you look at it, the program in isolation, like take one program and understand its impact, you would find that there was impact. But then the programs maybe are not aligned in a way that you can't sort of make one thread of understanding the impact. So I think that would be a key challenge, and obviously we would be very, very open to sort of collaborating with an institute like PIDE and any other institute would be willing to come in. We're very open to this idea of now even sharing data to the point where we can understand what's happening and then designing future interventions to parties.
Excellent. So my commercial sense is tingling. I think we're coming close to a transaction. We have a very good problem, which is are we spending the money in the right way? And we have a customer, which is saying that they're willing to work with you and they're willing to work on learning and access and governance. We now need a third party, such as PIDE. Dr. Nadeem, what do you say? Can you guys take this up as a project?
Absolutely.
How will we do this? Let's operationalize it. Okay, so we have one project. You want to add anything to the project?
We're not in a position to do a project.
No, this is not a question of money. It's a first question of putting a problem together and trying to see who would be the right problem people to attack it.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. My first is, and it follows from the earlier question. My name is Amna Ansari. Total cost per child until 8, what is that these days? And total cost, which means y'all's cost, everybody's cost that Punjab spends on getting one child in per year, right? I'd like to know that. And I'd like to know if you know what the equivalent cost in the madrasa is and the equivalent cost in a private school is, right? So I think these are metrics which are very important to understand. Second thing is, I see again, unfortunately I do hail from the World Bank originally. I've seen this education sector reform rather too closely from Tahseen Sayyid's days. I really think I need to ask this. You're tinkering still with the same variables you were doing in 1999, then in 2002, then in 2004. So you basically take an assumption that quality, and this is basically saying that, if you reform inputs, you improve quality, right? That I think is a very archaic assumption because two things you're not really taking. I see there is something on curriculum, but content and process and tools. I don't see any innovation. Is it really worth putting a child into a classroom physically till the age of 5? Do you do ECE the same way you were doing in 1960 in Britain? I really find this quite challenging. And I was living in Kazakhstan, and I think even there, in a population of 17 million, the tools being used now to bring children into education, especially when you talk of quality, because it's really not a question of just numeracy or literacy. And last thing is, where are the madrasas in all your equation?
Okay, let's answer at least 2 of those 3 questions.
So, in terms of the total cost per child, I think these are 2017 stats, but it's 9,800 for primary, and I think 12,000 for secondary. How does that compare with private? How does that compare with private? Of course, there's a range of private schools, so I don't think I would be able to comment on that. But you better judge of their fee structures and so on. And also, I'm not aware of how that compares with madrasa as well. In terms of changes in variables and content and processes. I wish we had more time to delve deeper into some of the things we wanted to present. If you look at, we never got a chance to present it, but if you look at the school improvement framework that is now upcoming, we're really critically rethinking all the indicators and all the variables we wanted a dent on, or we were, kind of monitoring very closely. So at least for this regime, I can say there is a shifting sense of what matters when you're measuring education and education impact. For processes, interventions like, like CPD and this new model of CPD and classroom observation, they're just starting points. So we're not saying they're the end of it, but we're just saying we're getting there. We've started thinking about and collecting that information that will be necessary to see how the process of education unfolds once a child is in the classroom. Particularly on ECE, I understand your point. I mean, what is worse than not having ECE is perhaps having a poor quality ECE program. But I think that's one lesson that we've learned as well. So we're not in the near future upscaling our ECE program. Where in all upcoming projects, for example, with the World Bank Human Capital Investment Project, we're just focusing on improving quality in the existing ECE classrooms in terms of the materials and the content. If you look at Haque, the learning materials that we provide to children, I can safely say that I would be very happy for my child to play with those. They're of decent quality and they're much varied than what anybody else is offering us. It's a 54-item kit, so you've got blocks and colors and everything that you need to stimulate a child's senses. So I think the point that we're trying to make is we're already thinking about these issues and we're thinking about the change that we need. The reality that in the past 15 years there was a lot of focus of inputs and yet we don't see the desired outcome that we envisioned. It's dawned upon us and we're working on it.
Dr. Hamid, sorry,
data. I want to show the data, just the data.
Okay.
Because we carried out this study. The top 3 private schools, which means Lincoln House, the city school, and or grammar school, they were spending 2 crore rupees. 2 crore rupees of their spend for 15 years of education. Means 2 years, for free, and then 12 years then A level. 2 crore rupees. This is 2015 figures.
Spending on what?
2 crore rupees.
On per student or
Per student.
2 crores?
Total
This is
over
per
15 years.
15 years.
Total 15 years education. Right? For 8 years.
Okay.
I would
Dr.
just like
Hamid,
to-
sorry,
Can
we?
Before we move on, very briefly, just to, because this one question that sir I think mentioned at one point, I think it's very important to understand that we're still tinkering with the same sort of input. I think just, at least my limited understanding, I think there's certain inputs that are just necessary for a system to have. And even though they might have started all the way in 1999, you still need to look at that. For example, provision of a toilet in a school. So you can't just say that in 2018 you should stop looking at a toilet. Obviously, and also these are things that deteriorate. So I think there's still importance to look at certain such indicators. Once again, as Anna said, if we would have had enough time to sort of present our school improvement framework, you would have seen that now there's a mix. The problem is that initially just looking at those things. It's better हम बाद में refer करते हैं. It's also
Hamid sir.
we can show it to you.
Very interesting discussion so far, but I'm a little disappointed. I'll be very frank with you. We've heard this over and over again, as Mansoor pointed out and Ahmed, over the last 20-30 years. Education for all, education sector reforms. There are many other things happening, and I had something to do with some of the proposals which were never carried out, but that's another matter. First of all, this public-private partnership, I'm very scared about it. Let's make up our minds. What is the government for? There are certain services are responsibility of the government, which includes education, health, see, and this is absolutely important. If you bring in public-private partnership, it's not going to work. The out-of-school children, you need basically 3 enrollments, and I doubt the enrollment figures. I've seen how they were fudged when I was in the Planning Commission. I'll give you an example. When I joined in 2005 the Planning Commission as member, they had just made a 5-year program, and so they asked me to look at the English, certain chapters, for 28 chapters. I said, it's not the English, it's the content that is wrong. The education sector showed graphs with enrollments going up and up and up. I said, does it happen even in science? And these are human beings. So I said, bring me the raw data. And 4 million children disappeared out of 26 million. I said, what is the reason? Which we all want to show we are doing better than the previous one. That's another matter. Secondly, if we accept that the role of government is delivery of services, then education is very critical. So data is important, analysis is important, but then the right decisions are also important. And here the teacher is a long pole in the tent of education. That's the only thing that matters in the end. Whether you teach under the tree, you teach in a classroom, you can have 54 teaching aids, it doesn't matter. It's the teacher that's important. And you've got some very interesting things here, but how will you monitor this? How will you carry it out? I'll give you 2 small examples and then I'll stop. 1989, the People's Party came to power. I think they introduced a National Reconstruction Program. I was in the Atomic Energy Commission. We used to hire people in the provincial headquarters. We were told, go into the rural areas. We were hiring scientific assistants, bachelors, BScs, and only 1 second class allowed metric, FSc or BSc. And we found that more than half of our candidates in Sindh were from outside Karachi. Okay, we'll go and have the interviews in Larkana. And about 100 people appear, 100 plus. Can you believe me? We had to come down to the end. They were first class metric, first class FSc, first class BSc. We drew a rectangle 2 by 3. Please tell us the area of this rectangle. It was terrible. So we asked them, what's the matter? One person blurted out, sir, इस बोर ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है कि भुट्टो खानदान के कामदार हो जाओ, जितने पैसे दोगे उतने नंबर मिल जाएंगे, उतनी डिग्री मिल जाएगी. 8वीं के बाद हमने पढ़ाई करके कोई सर्व हासिल नहीं की. That is the state of education. So rural population is the one deprived, not the cities. And sir, one last example. I was in Uzbekistan in 2018. I have fascinating things going on there. They do not have these 3 English system or Urdu system or madrasa system. They have a compulsory 12 years education, 5 to 17 years for every child, 1 syllabus, 1 language. At the age of 17 only, you can move into the madrasa stream or vocational stream or go to the universities. And here now, if you want to bring in some reforms in enrollments, early childhood education, may I suggest, please look at the Brazilian Bolsa Familia and the Solidarnos program in Mexico. As soon as the child is born, or the mother's health, inoculation, people get paid. So the SAS program is going to go off the rocks. So bring in, and then mother enrolls the child. So initial also. Now in Brazil it's gone to 10 years education, you get paid only if the child is enrolled. And if there is regular vaccination. So a lot of things can be done, but please, I'm sorry, if it's deferred paid and so on, we had so many, as pointed out, so much money coming in for the donors. I don't think it's going to work. Every 4 years bring out a new analysis and reform. Sorry for this.
Okay, thank you. So just before you answer, we seem to be converging on a couple of maybe a question which is around transformation of education, out of school with special emphasis on rural. What is the role of government? But before you can answer, perhaps the lady wants to add something to this.
Can I just say, I've come from Glasgow, Scotland, and I've been working with the Scottish education for about 21 years now. I went in when it was the 5 to 14, the old curriculum, and now in 2006 we implemented the new curriculum for excellence, which is now, and I'm saying like we started it in 2006, and now the teachers have got grips of it, and we're thinking it's starting to thrive. So if you're thinking of that time period, on top of that, every teacher in Scotland has to go through a 5-year educational program with 1 year, which is what we call like a house job or something like here. 1 year you're a probation in a school where you're working with experienced teachers, and after that you are given a class. And when I was looking at just your slides and things, looking at assessment for learning, that was an initiative led by Dylan Williams and Paul Black in Cambridge University of London, and I've been part of that for about 7-8 years. It took the system 7 years because their primary school is about 7 years, so they start from primary 1 till primary 7, or reception till year 6 in England, to get through the grips of assessment is for learning, where they're getting summative assessments as an end of, but formative assessment is ongoing, and teachers have to have a year's training to know how to formatively assess. You cannot just say it's an ongoing assessment. There are tools for that. There are about 7 or 8 different toolkits that have been established by different associations to use assessment is for learning. And the same for the methodology. What you've got is spot on, but how you're going to do it is the big question. The other thing, because it's very easy now, there's no transparency in any of the European or Australian or Scandinavian countries. You can pick up anything from online, make it presentable, because that is how the world is going. So it's not like we are thinking education from the basics or from like reinventing the wheel. The same is for your teacher training, which is excellent on words, that if you are going to build schools capacity within, which is what now we're doing. And while, just to make it like everybody aware, when we were doing this reform in Scotland, UK was going through its worst recession. There was no money at all. So there wasn't any like huge sums of money when you're saying like, so capacity within was through teachers' goodwill to go and train, but there were benchmarks. So if a teacher wasn't like ticking up those benchmarks, they were not actually progressing. So to keep their job, they had to have standards against those benchmarks.
Okay. Thank you. So a lot of good questions raised. What I'd like to do is just concretize it into one question. Let's talk about your early childhood education program, because I think the idea of skilling teachers, including through apprenticeship programs, the idea of bringing mothers into the situation, in other words, non-teachers into the education, as you mentioned that they're doing in Brazil and other places. How are you approaching this? What are the global best practices you've seen based on designing what you've done, and why have you selected the approach that you have?
First of all, I think I'd like to thank you, Sir, and you, ma'am, for appreciation, encouragement, and also criticism. I will say your disappointment is misplaced, because that's true. You've heard the same things over and over again. But I think I'll also, come to the concrete question a bit. I just wanted to say a couple of things first. We realize the challenges, and I think I was also very critical of the government. But I think one thing that I sympathized with after spending 3 to 4 years within it is that there is a certain structure, to the government machinery, and it takes a certain kind of effort and time to get things done and get things rolling. So in terms of data utilization, what decisions does it result in? I think our stance is that we're trying to explore whatever avenues or room for maneuver we have to push, the kind of reform agenda that we envision and we think will actually improve quality of education. Teachers, you mentioned, that's precisely the starting point. The e-transfer policy, the casual leave policy, we did mention it, but for the first time, teachers don't need to go to anybody to get their casual leave approved, and I'm kind of envious of that, because even I don't get the number of casual leaves that I have in a year. I don't get to avail those. As long as you've got leaves remaining, teachers are welcome to use them, and without any fear of monitoring assistance and so on. So I think we're trying to step in the right direction. To come to your point on ECE, we started a program, I should say, without much thought, and to be fair, it was also a pilot. We started ECE in 2013 in Punjab. And we defined certain elements within that, but we realized that we wouldn't be able to institutionalize it at all let alone institutionalize a quality program if we did not have a policy around it, and if the policy did not, specify any criterion for quality. So all the international best practices, everything else, all the literature, all the research that we did, we kind of collapsed into this policy that was launched in 17. So we developed very detailed quality standards, which are, I wouldn't say they're idealistic, but at the same time they're very realistic. We've contextualized them for Punjab. And now I think going forward, what we're trying to do is to stick to that and get a pool of schools that can master that program, get a pool of teachers who can master that program, and then upscale it. So one of the things that I can mention, and I've been mentioning earlier as well, is the human capital investment project. What we're trying to do is we have a pool of existing EC classrooms in most disadvantaged districts, to address your question on disadvantaged as well. And we're trying to ensure quality in that program. We're going to have very new and very thoroughly defined trainings for teachers on our new curriculum that's also been approved and notified. We'll ensure that there's an adequate supply of materials for children, and then just ensuring that the kind of space that they are in is also is conducive to their learning. One point, Mariam, I think you made, and I would want to reiterate, is the element of time. It's too early to say, whether you have or not reaped the benefits of what you soon, now. And I think, like Abdal said, only time will tell where these reforms are taking us. So the request is, to let a certain number of years elapse before we start asking those questions. Otherwise, we run the risk of ending these programs before they get started.
Can I add something? Sorry, it's almost working in a different manner. So just to add to your point, ma'am, I think that you've just hit the nail on the head. Is that government, at least from as far as my understanding, fails when it comes to implementation. So you can design, you can have the best of the best interventions, and that even in past you've had some very good ideas, and ever since I've moved to the government, so I was with the bank and I just shifted sides and went to the government. I've seen some of the best designed interventions and they're just locked up into government offices, cupboards of the people in the government offices, and they very proudly say, oh, this was designed in 2013 by Damo, this was designed in 2011. So I think the problem is implementation. And it's also like the fit between design and implementation. Because what happens is that, and this is an analogy I use, they design a Rolls Royce for the roads who are not even equipped to run in Suzuki FX. No offense to people who have Suzuki FX. The problem is that the interventions are so, at times, are complicated enough that the people in the government, on the government side, they just don't have capacity to break it down to make sure that you implement it. So this model of hiring highly paid consultancy firms, I think it's about time, and that's a decision for the policy makers.
What time to close this idea? Or
I'm not going to comment on that. I'm still paid by one of those people.
My name is Nadeem, I'm a researcher here. Actually, I'm going to develop the point raised by my PhD, actually, Dr. Gordon. I noticed that in your reform, you're still sticking to Urdu medium. Don't you think it's time to change from the very start to English medium instructions for kids?
I can answer that. So I think, ma'am, that's a fundamental question that a lot of people have sort of thought about, and in the past, it's actually at times it gets sort of in a way that people actually laugh about it, because there have been so many times that it has been switched from either or. Somebody would come and say English, somebody would come and say Musharraf did it into English, somebody else came and said no, Urdu. Now the focus is, at least what we think is that now the decision has finally been made and there's a lot of thought that's gone into it and a lot of research. So the decision now is not just blatantly going to Urdu, it's about native language. So now the medium of instruction, the focus is that you teach in the mother tongue. So it's not just about Urdu and English anymore, because even Urdu for most children is not a primary language. Most of the children, they call them Saraiki or Punjabi is a primary language. Urdu at times becomes a second or third language, which we've seen. So it's also an assumption that Urdu is a mother tongue, which I don't think I think it's true. So now the focus is about mother tongue. It's not just about English and Urdu. And there's research that supports that if you teach a child, at least in primary, in their mother tongue, they learn more, because The child is, for example, if you're learning mathematics, the child is not, if you're teaching them in English, he is learning two things at the same time. So English and mathematics. If you're teaching them in their mother tongue, at least they're learning mathematics. And then the transition is in a way that starting third grade onwards, it's English, Urdu both. The books will be designed in a way that it's English, Urdu, and then by grade 5 you transition into English. So not like a blatant jump from Urdu and English.
Hello, I am Dr. Zaigal Jujua. I am Associate Professor in the Department of Education, Economic University. Thank you very much for the good presentation. I am especially thankful to PIDE for the creating of discussion forum on this important issue. I would like to ask one question that about the quality education. That at international level and national level there are various reports which depict a diverse data on the students' learning achievement, infrastructure and physical facilities. So there is very difficult to own that figures and make reliable decisions. So is there any common standard for the quality education, sports curriculum, assessment, teachers training, and other relevant infrastructure and physical facilities, so that we have a data, true data, on the basis of whole population, not sample data, on the sample basis, so that we can make a concrete decisions for the policy making and decision making in the education sector.
Thank you very much for your question. So you're right. I think it's difficult to begin with to define what quality education is, and it becomes even tougher when you have to take decisions based on that. But I think, like Abdal highlighted earlier, if you think of it in terms of input processes and outputs, there's certain inputs that you definitely need to look into. Now, what is what is the bare minimum or what is the standard that you want to achieve in those is something that is completely contextual. So, for example, our student to toilet ratio would be depending on the kind of enrollments and the kind of infrastructure that we have. In terms of quality overall, I think I'll again go back to that idea of the school improvement framework that we're in the phase of testing in Punjab. We're trying to make some sense of all that we're monitoring and to see how that leads to qualitative improvements at the level of the school. So in all the madness that that our systems are, I think we lose visibility of the school itself, which is a central unit or the key unit where you're actually situating education service delivery. So what we're trying to do now is place a greater emphasis, a greater weight on all the variables that link to teachers and teaching and student learning, and then have a very minimal focus on infrastructural facilities and so on, which are important, but nonetheless can only go to a certain degree in really transforming quality and learning. I go back to the point that Sir made here about teachers. I think we're very cognizant of the fact that unless your teacher is able to teach, everything else becomes secondary. So effective teaching, supporting teachers, that's kind of the focus that we're going for and are hoping would yield a significant improvement in quality.
Thank you. This lady, sorry. Can we ask, because there's somebody raised the hand some time ago, then you can be the next one. Please go ahead. One of your students.
My name is Saima, and I have done research in fieldwork research in Punjab, qualitative research, and I conducted about 150 interviews with women and men in different villages as well as in cities.
On education.
Yes, basically education of women and global impact policies, transnational policies. My question over here is that you're talking about how would you improve the teachers, but the point is teachers are most of the time not available in the school. And how would you ensure that teachers would come to the school? Because when they're in the area where they want to live, they don't attend the school. They go to school, they mark their attendance and come back to them. So they're never available.
Secondly, you're talking about you're introducing the system of e-transfer. Now this appears to be a very sophisticated system, but the point is most of the teachers, they don't want to get transferred from the place where they are living. And when government transfers the teachers, they don't join that place. So how would you ensure that? And secondly, why don't you involve the teachers then? Why don't you ask them that where they want to reside, where they want to work, what is better place for them to work, and even otherwise, how improvement can come in teaching policies as well. Secondly, you were talking about children who are living, I would say, under the line of poverty. They're not very rich. They're not at all rich. Not even they come on the line of poverty. They're living under the line of poverty. Why don't you introduce such kind of policies or such kind of incentives in the schools that they want to come there? For example, introducing the concept of meal. Like you're saying that we have got quite a lot of donations and funds, and we are returning it, we are not taking it. Why don't you take it and introduce such kind of facilities for them? Because they do not know what is education. Their parents are uneducated. They do not know what education is and what would they help them. So we can give this advantage.
Thank you. So good economist questions on incentives for teachers, incentives for students and parents. How much is that really in your practice, and what real instruments do you have to actually redesign incentives?
I think that's a very good question. I think that's a two-part question. First on teachers. So I think it's a conversation that obviously it's very important. All of these reforms just go out the window if there's no teacher in the school. So I think that's given. Everybody I think understands that. The problem right now is that, and there's no harm in saying this, I think openly, that Punjab currently has a deficit of teacher supply as compared to demand. So the demand is higher, the supply is lower. The model was at least 3 teachers per school, and right now Punjab is running a teacher rationalization exercise. So the idea is, what happens is that not all of the public schools, enrollment is not what you sort of want it to be. So if we even have schools, at least 4,000 schools that have less than 40 kids in a school. So then the problem starts from there. So then you need to have, if there is a child, you need to have a teacher. So if you start placing teachers in those schools, then you have to take out teachers from other schools. Then the next step is either you hire new teachers or you do merging of schools. So a school that has less than 200 enrollment, you merge it with another school and sort of increase that enrollment. And that is exactly what Punjab is right now doing. So the idea is that they run a teacher rationalization exercise. They understand the difference between the sanctioned posts and the filled posts. What that will give you, an idea of where the deficit is in the system. The next step then is you understand teacher to student to teacher ratio. So in the schools in which student teacher ratio is less, you move those teachers, you merge those schools with the nearby schools, and then ensure that when you build up that enrollment in that school, you have enough teachers in that school. So ideal to student teacher ratio that at least Punjab is setting is 35. So for every 35 students there should be one teacher. So there have been steps taken to that. To involve on your comment on teachers not having enough understanding of technology, I think that's an assumption that has been sort of recently has been sort of shattered in a way, because
No, this was not the question. The question was that if you transfer them to e-transfer system and they don't join the school because they don't want to go at that particular place.
so then you have an entire system which is called the District Education Authority. So the District Education Authority ensures that the teacher has to report, and also now everything is digitized. So you at a provincial level you will find out if the teacher has joined in a new school or not, because if when the school teacher is being assigned to a new school in a given time frame, they have to report. If they don't report, there's a report that is generated at the provincial level, and then obviously action has to be taken. The problem that was happening was that since the system wasn't digitized, so you wouldn't know at a provincial level how many teachers have joined and how many haven't. And you're absolutely right, that is a major problem, and that largely stems from the fact that teacher has been a politicized sort of a profession.
Can you just add 1 or 2 words on the parents' incentives or means and so on, and then we move on to another?
I think that obviously, I think yes, as an economist you would be much better to know what is the impact of. So I'll give it an example of the current intervention. So Punjab is running a girls stipend program and it's been running it for the past 15 years. Very recently, I think in this current PMIU started unpacking the data. What we found out is that yes, it hasn't had an impact. But if you also look at the growth in enrollment in these 16 districts, and we run it in the 16 districts, ranked lower on multi-poverty index. If you look at the increase in enrollment in these 16 districts, it's almost similar to the increase in enrollment in the other districts of Punjab. Having said that, that's not a good enough way of sort of assessing if these programs have been impacted, because if you don't have, if you take it away, you might not have had even this improvement as well. But the nudge, what you're saying is actually a nudge, right? So it can be a meal, it can be a stipend, it can be you can give a bicycle to a kid. There have been multiple, and I would invite you to look at those reports. So USA ran a program, they started giving Haque. It didn't have very good results, to be very honest. There was a moment, but what started happening is that in school mein Haque milta tha, wahan pe ek school mein ek bacha multiple schools mein enrolled hona shuru ho gaya, because har kisi ko Haque chahiye tha. So I think so look at those reports. There have been impact assessments, multiple available online, and you find your answer there. It's still an either or. People still try it. Punjab is the in-house school program that you mentioned has a component of nudge. They're giving bicycles and vouchers to students, so vouchers to girls, bicycles to boys. It's still a nudge, but how much impact there is, I think there's still the jury is still on that.
Dr. Nadeem will have you.
This was a very quick comment on a couple of things. One is, everything that I hear, it's a top-down approach. This is a system, if you look at like a universal, like a complete whole, almost a one-school system where you're transferring teachers, merging this, doing that. I would have thought that a better approach to education is probably a bottom-up approach. There be some competition, that schools feel more and so I'll tell you comment on that, why it should be just the top-down and the bottom, because it also goes into your implementation. You said implementation is the problem. I think very frankly, design is not implementation. You're trying to design this thing top-down from the wrong way. The other question that I have is very simple. You have a lot of things you're talking about, merging schools and teachers, seem to rely a lot on teachers. Why are you not using, things like what I have, the online education system? Because now Haque has told us for years ago that Haque is the best way to teach people. Why are we still relying on teachers and teacher training and not really relying on technology? That's kind of bizarre. We've still got the old thing going on from 1950, teacher training, where now you use digital data to control the system, but not to educate it, which is also very surprising. The last question that I have is, what about the Pakistan, the Punjab textbook board?
I think your mic is not working.
What about the textbook board? Will we continue with that ancient Soviet thing, the textbook board, and give kids substandard textbooks? And what about similarly the standardized, you've got the examination systems? Are these really adding value? This course is, and the final thing is the curriculum. Are we still going to teach kids 2 or 3 subjects that go beyond the standard subjects, STEM subjects that we need? When I see 30% of the syllabus is non-STEM, which the kids are never going to use. For example, religion is secondary. For example, Pakistan studies is secondary. Are we going to do that or not?
Okay, so let's start with the first one.
So, thank you, sir. Bunch of very interesting comments and questions. Beginning with the one on technology, you completely get that point. I think it's the point we're trying to make is that it's just the beginning of the technological transformation of SAT. So I think for the number of things that we've done in the past year, this, for example, e-transfer, casual leave, classroom observations, the census digitally.
You're using it for control, not education.
Yes. So I'm coming to that as well. So the use of technology itself, I think it's picked up momentum, and I think it's only a matter of time that we'll see a lot more happening there. In terms of how we're thinking of education, top down versus bottom up, of course a big challenge is scale. But having said that, I think we're moving towards top-down approaches. I think one motivation for coming up with the school improvement framework was that one, when you have data, you only say you're monitoring from the top, you assign targets, you're just looking at that, you go into schools, you ask them questions, you come back, return them, you never give anything back. So I think one of the things that we wanted to do was one to have, schools first go through a process of self-evaluation, just look at, things themselves and then report it without fear of being reprimanded. Two, in terms of competition, we're trying to use our assistant education officers to, drive a certain degree of competition within a markers of schools. So an AEO, our field officer responsible for, mentoring and monitoring, the AEO has about 12 to 15 schools in his span. And the idea is to develop very good, good community of practice. So how can one head teacher learn from the other? How can one school, see itself fairing versus another? That's the kind of philosophy I think that we're heading towards.
Can I just step in on that? Is anyone here involved with or owns or runs a low-cost private school? You do? Okay.
We have a community school in Delhi, Mukarrabnisa Girls High Secondary School, and it's divided into two. One is a low-cost fee structure, the other is totally free.
Very good, thank you. So I'm glad you're here, because one of the things I find surprising that whenever you go to education conferences, you see people from government, you see educators, you see economists, but actually what I've been surprised in Pakistan is a huge success story. And that success story is that whether non-profit such as yours or for-profit, they are now people who educate at a lower cost kids. Now there are 37% of the school population and it's growing at 12%, and they are absent from the discussion. They are not here. You've come here in another capacity, not in your capacity as a low cost. So what we have is a success model. I'm not saying that they're not schools which are just trying to make money, but it's a non-trivial proposition to set up a school. It's more complex to set up a school than a McDonald's. These are people who set up schools and the market is paying for them. But when the government looks at the schooling system, they're looking at trying to improve a system that is broken rather than looking as a model, either other countries or a remarkable success story in Pakistan, which is the low-cost private schools. Why aren't we bringing them into the discussion? How much are you in the government, and I'm not saying I know you have particular views, but how much should the government be looking at where the success is actually happening and trying to replicate that through incentives and other means?
I mean, that was my question was that we're spending a lot of dollar money right from 47. A business model for education reform is the same. When I got this task in 2010, all I did was I picked up all those 10 education policies, and there is not a single sentence missing. I mean, it was like an encyclopedia of education reform, on which we paid more than $5 or $6 billion in the last 50, 60 years. But the implementation was missing. Here's the school that we run. It's in 80 canals, the largest girls' school in Pindi Islamabad, and we are running on our own. Last 60 years, we are providing course to the poor 300 students, free lunch every day. We reform. Look at these examples. These are all, homemade, homegrown schools. Example, last 60 years, not a single penny for a sponsor, not a single penny from the government. We are putting in our own money, our resources, and this is the example that we need to follow.
Okay, so then before you answer, let's just open it up to anyone else who wants to comment on this. I believe you believe that the government should continue and expand its delivery model.
Absolutely, and focus on that.
Okay, so you have a different side of the debate.
I've known for the last 60 years when it was first started. And Mukarrabnisa school was near Murray Road.
Of course, not Murray Road, Rawal Road. Yes. I'm the board member. I'm a second generation board member. I mean, my elders were there, I was there.
So, but it had a basic grant from the Mukarrabnisa.
No, nothing, not a single penny.
That's wonderful. But sir, another big example is the Faizabad, Faiz Islam High School. It was a Yatim Khana. Now they started technical vocational education there. And they get people very poor and they make them fit for employment and put them into the market. It's not about online education. I'm not a great fan of online education. As a supplement is okay, but not the substitute for proper education and teacher-student interaction, especially in the early years. I have a question, if you allow me, for the lady from Glasgow. Would you allow O and A levels, this is something that you should maybe like to look at, would you allow O and A levels to be taught in your country as an alternative to practical result and no practical work in the science?
It's strange because when I came here, I'm very upset to see the systems that we follow from the Cambridge. They're not in UK. No UK school goes through those systems. They are just written for Pakistan or the Southeast Asian countries, and they're implemented here, giving people an idea they're actually competing with children there, which is not the reality.
So the reason I asked was, not only enrollment is important, but completion on time. And the only incentive to complete even 8 years of education is if you think you can have jobs. And I understand in the UK at the O level, you've got 1 or 2 vocational streams always present at the O level.
Can I sharpen the debate? Sorry, I'd like to stick to one question and I'd love to get your opinion too. What is the role of government? Is it delivery, as Amit Saab saying, or is it copying? Amit Saab, do you want to opine on this or some other point?
No, same one.
Okay.
So actually, I'd like to differ. You see, the role of the government has evolved. And now, the question, we started this on Twitter and finally egged Nadeem to respond. I mean, I think his response is very crisp. Basically, the role of the government is providing security to the citizens. Right? Now, we've expanded the definition of security, sir, if you allow me to complete. We've expanded the definition of security into bringing in health, education, nourishment, etc., etc., etc. Now, yes, it is a primary need, or at least it was as it was perceived by 20th century or 19th century economics. But today, I have raised children from, one is now 32, married, again divorced, and I have intermediate boys in university, then I have an 8-year-old. The 8-year-old was machine learned. His nanny was a machine. His current learning is also a machine. That's his iPad. It used to be his mini pad back in Almaty. The chap knows more, understands more, has more basic understanding of life than all my children who went to proper schools and were actually taught by a teacher. So I beg to differ that actually there is a necessity of a teacher. We have a romantic notion of a teacher, but believe me, the romantic teacher to my kid is YouTube, some guy's name I forget, it's somebody Khan Academy, right? So I want to make this point on role of government. I think it's absolutely not right. But I also think one thing we're ignoring in all this debate is that we are fundamentally, and I think Nadeem sir also pointed out, we are just trying to reform a decrepit system which is old-fashioned without thinking that is there something out there in space which we should be heading towards rather than wasting all this money which we have hitherto wasted. Now, efforts like this, and this is why I want to bring in rural government, you have 12 million students, right? All of the rural support programs, the NGOs in Pakistan, I've worked with them since 1998, I still continue working with them. They run magnificent schools when you allow them to do so. Why have these schools, as of PCF, not been handed over to these people to run and create a competitive market? And instead of focusing on brick and mortar and inputs and all that, you should focus on what the government's role is, what is to be taught in those schools, right? That's it. Let anybody else run schools, sell them. Honestly, you'll save more money and you'll produce better quality if you let that market rampant. Because currently what you're doing is trying to compete with private education, and private education in Pakistan, as was rightly pointed out by Shaukat Sahib as well, that these they are running systems which are obsolete.
Okay, great. So, should we expand your role or diminish your role in terms of delivery?
Do we have another speaker or is that all?
Sir, one thing when I said role of government, at the local level where it's absolutely essential. The schools, as pointed out by several people here, must be community owned, community based. And that is where quality and continuity will come.
So that's
You
not
won't have
government.
Well, it is, well,
The government may subsidize or fund or
these guys need to
organize.
get out of this business. They need to go find a job somewhere in UK. Yeah, I think that we need to have community-run schools. We need to let them do. A government should design good curricula, single curricula, so class gets change Pakistan class system to community.
So Amitabh is suggesting you guys should all join the other union. But what do you think about that?
You find me a job in the UK right now, I'll run away in a minute.
So that's the sad part, isn't it?
That's the sad part. I've left UK to come here for
That was a joke. There's a reason
I was born
I'm
here
sorry,
and
that
lived
is
my
not a
whole life
joke.
here, come here just for education.
Okay, please answer.
And that's, I think we share that motivation. I've also come back myself. So
I came back, I've come back also 50 years ago.
But I think I would say that there is definitely a role that the government has to play in delivery, and I don't see it happening any other way. I don't know. I think this the fact that it's not delivering or it hasn't delivered in the past does not mean that you just give it away. I think if you and that's what we're trying to do, if you're making an effort to see where you went wrong, and if you link it to like the point on security, I think it's a constitutional right and you definitely need to deliver well on it. Whether you've been able to do that or not is a different question, but it's very easy to hand it over. So, I think it's difficult to get, it's far more difficult and challenging to get your hands dirty and messy in it and then come out victorious.
Can we have a show of hands? How many people feel that government should essentially focus on regulation, curriculum, enabling, funding, private sector in education?
Communities.
And communities.
Private sector?
Including civil society.
I think what we don't.
No, how much should that be its main focus?
not
We
for
can
profit.
let's just do a show of hands and we'll then we'll debate later. Show of hands.
Not for profit.
Not for profit or for
Can you
profit.
simplify that question? Are you trying to ask whether public schools should exist or not? Right?
I was trying to be a little more opaque. Yes, should public school exist or not? Let's make it simpler. Yes or no? Yes. And how many people think that public schools, let the government get out of the service delivery?
So you mean the
business?
Pakistani public
Yes.
schools, not the British public schools?
Pakistani public school, we're talking about the Pakistan system. How many people feel, how many people feel that the government should improve and expand the delivery of education, or how many people feel the government should get out of that business and focus its money and effort on regulation, curriculum, etc.? So how many are for improving and expanding delivery? And how many are for government getting out of that and focusing on regulation, curriculum and things like that? So people
You ask a question a different way and you have a very different show of hands.
Well, but the thing is that this democracy always gives you the lowest denominator, which in fact you see from.
That's true. But Amreen, you had an objection to the discussion.
We forget about the scale of education.
Yeah.
Even when we talk about the TCF and the NRS, how many schools are they running? TCF runs 1,400 schools. What is that? Nothing compared to the public school system.
The question
So
is,
you have to fix our public school
I think the
system.
bottom line,
You cannot say that, let's eliminate public schools. You have to fix the system. Yes, bring EdTech,
We're not
bring
saying
education,
eliminate,
bring
we are saying we
but you
need
cannot
to
do
add
away
on.
with the government school system.
I think the
I'm
bottom
sorry.
line is that
can.
our percentage of private schools is the highest in the world. I mean, American society, look at that. They have, private education hardly 4 or 5%. We have more than 20%. So I think on the data itself, we did that all the data as part of our education policy, which is online. We get all this data from the PTI education policy. So we have the highest private schools anywhere in the world.
And
Which
fastest
is
growing,
shocking.
one of the fastest growing.
But even
What
in
is the
that,
shocking thing is yet the results are not there. I mean, we're producing O and A levels for abroad. How many? We are guilty ourselves. Top nurse graduates go abroad. Top GIT graduates go abroad. I mean, we are spending so much of money and they're going abroad. So we need to look at how do we absorb our own people for our own country, education, that comes first. You know? So, and then at bottom line is private schools have their own place, public schools have their own place, community schools have their own place, and madrasa schools have their own place. So I think we need to, it's not either or. We need to have every, all the types of schools and improve all the schools. That's what
just to add, there is one statistic I just like to throw out there. I think and this is something we hear a lot. In this case, private schools are a success model. Private schools are successful. Private schools have done well. The recent study that conducted by the World Bank Service Indicator Survey actually shows that if you look at the learning levels of the grade levels of students, so a fourth grader in public school actually is somewhere around second grade. So his learning levels around second grade. A private school child is around 2.4. So 4 months ahead of a public school child. So I think it's also you can't just blatantly say that public schools are not working. And also I think if you also calculate the cost of private schools altogether, because public resources come in a chunk, so it's easy to calculate. But I think it's very easy if you start calculating all the private school investment, and by investment I mean the amount of resources that parents are paying. You would see that I think it's maybe the cost is higher than this. There's a chance, right? So, and if that is the case, and then you see learning levels, then it's not a very successful model. And also and this is your question, what you're asking is an absolute philosophical question that perhaps I would ask myself as well. But the question is that it's based on the assumption that if you close down public schools, somebody else is going to come up and pick up the mantle and say, "Hum bana denge." But you don't see that happening right now. Like, yes, there are people like sir who are well-intentioned, but then how many people? If that was the case, sir, then you would not want to give girls stipend to get children in schools. That everybody want to come to schools. You would not want to give keys and bicycles, because then the assumption is that everybody wants to get educated. Perhaps that is not the case. Then the question is bigger than what you're asking. The question is education needed? Then I think that is what you're asking. जिसको ज़रूरत है वो private में चला जाए. जिसको नहीं चाहिए उसको नहीं.
Okay, so we run out of time. So thank you very much. I think we started with the question, what is Punjab doing, and we ended up with the question, is education needed? So thank you very much. It's been a very lively and good debate. Okay, over time now we can go to overtime. Yeah.
About English and Urdu.
Thank you.
I think the emphasis on Urdu is excellent. And if you look at the quality of people coming out at the university level, it's terrible. Because they don't know English. Secondly, sir, you may like to, your team might like to look at the Anjuman Hamayat Islam model. What happened 100 years ago? Why these community schools are based on local contributions were made? My family had something to do with it 3 generations ago. And how it changed the educational profile of the job. From very low literacy among the Muslims to much higher.
With community-based participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.